The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
Whether it's a school, a church, a hospital, they need a warrant.
The Trump administration's sweeping immigration crackdown takes shape. The pushback from several states and places of worship.
They get out content, so movements are going to have the ability to gain traction much more rapidly.
TikTok safe, at least for now. How the platform could have played a role in the 2024 election. And later, car costs are still sky high, but loan prices could be coming down. How to determine if 2025 is a good year for you to buy a vehicle. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thank you for joining us on this Weekend Edition. We take a look at the big headlines of the week and look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. Preliminary figures show a drop in major violent crimes in 2024. Which cities saw the biggest changes? And criticism pouring in over Trump's January 6th pardons. The Capitol officer who was there and why he says he wasn't shocked. The number of Americans filing for unemployment hits a 3-year high. Why the trend doesn't match with what experts say is a strong economy. But first, immigration thrust back into the spotlight as President Trump returns to the White House. In D.C. this weekend, lawmakers are both celebrating and criticizing the way Trump's mass deportation plan is playing out. Hundreds of arrests have already been made, and the president has brought in new federal resources to help. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell.
It's an episode playing out on repeat in cities across America. This man arrested just outside of Boston. Fox News capturing these arrests also in Boston, which they say include MS-13 gang members and rape and murder suspects.
Jails and mental institutions from other countries and gang members right off the streets of the toughest cities in the world are being brought to the United States of America and emptied out into our country.
Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security just granting new authorities to the Drug Enforcement Administration, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and the U.S. Marshals Service to assist with immigration enforcement, as his executive orders have declared schools, hospitals, and churches are no longer off limits, with mixed messages coming from community leaders.
So whether it's a school, a church, a hospital, they need a warrant. And if they don't have it, they don't get in.
Supporters of President Trump's mass deportation plan celebrating the operations already being carried out.
He wants to rid our cities and our country of people who are members of the drug cartels, sex traffickers, gang members, criminals who have been wreaking havoc in cities like mine.
Her city of New York, as well as Boston, Philadelphia, Denver, Miami, and Washington, D.C., all sanctuary cities, among the cities targeted first, with nearly 500 arrests made, as some question the strategy.
Why is it not Tennessee? Why not Georgia? Why not Florida? Those where a large population of undocumented immigrants are, easy to find in these plans. So it's more of a political agenda than it is really that about sort of following out and carrying the law.
As these operations unfold in cities, the southern border itself is preparing for a flood of U.S. troops. 1,500 already ordered there, another 10,000 told to plan for the same. A mission involving blocking entry to migrants on the grounds they pass through countries where communicable diseases are present. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
Preliminary data from police departments nationwide show a decrease in major violent crimes. Dozens of cities, including New York, Baltimore, Chicago, they have reported drops in homicides in comparison to 2023. Robberies were also down in the 10 largest U.S. cities, while car thefts went down by double digits across the board. However, several cities did see an increase in both physical and sexual assaults. A former Capitol police officer expressing outrage over President Trump's decision to pardon those convicted on January 6th.
My outrage, sure, it lies with Donald Trump. It lies with, absolutely. But I think I'm more upset at the people who are more surprised now and shocked now that Donald Trump did what he said he was going to do from the start.
That was Officer Harry Dunn speaking on Capitol Hill. He says he still suffers from PTSD stemming from the riots, which he describes as, quote, the largest single-day mass assault of law enforcement officers in the nation's history. Dunn's remarks come as House Republicans announce a new special committee to probe the chamber's now defunct January 6th panel. The University of Michigan says it's ending its 2-decade-long partnership with a Shanghai university. That's after pressure from congressional Republicans. According to Congressman John Moulinar, 5 Chinese students who came to Michigan under the partnership have been charged with lying to investigators. They were allegedly found trespassing at Camp Grayling 200 miles away. Conservative watchdog group Campus Reform supporting the decision.
Not only are they promoting American values, but they're also limiting foreign influence, which is something that is a massive problem on our university campuses.
And Michigan's action follows similar moves by Georgia Tech and University of California, Berkeley last year. New developments: Harvard University is adopting a definition of anti-Semitism that will be used in discipline cases as part of a lawsuit settlement. It's one of several moves aimed at protecting Jewish students in the wake of Gaza war protests. Under the definition, some criticisms of the nation of Israel are considered anti-Semitism. 2 lawsuits filed by Jewish groups accuse the Ivy League University of not doing enough to prevent and punish anti-Semitism at the school. The definition of anti-Semitism Harvard is using comes from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And the power of younger social media influencers is being felt. On the eve of Inauguration Day, TikTok sponsored a party honoring a select group of individuals who helped with President Trump's re-election campaign. The host of the party telling Reuters 2024 was the first influencer election. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, explains.
Younger voices are being heard, including about politics. That party kicked off just hours after TikTok began restoring services on Sunday. The influencers in attendance, Gen Z, also millennials, many of which have millions of followers. Paige Cannell, a millennial content creator, has built a large TikTok following, right around 250,000, talking about parenthood.
Making lunch for your kids is not the mental load, but you want to know what is the mental load? It's knowing that this child, she likes sun butter, but this one, cream cheese.
And just everyday obstacles.
If you're in a marriage with a man, then chances are at some point in time you have been frustrated that he doesn't see the invisible labor you're doing.
She says in 2024, the content she created on TikTok made up about 25 to 30% of her total income, something she knows younger generations like Gen Z are taking advantage of, along with having their voices heard.
Not only are they connecting and having a voice in a way that they haven't before, they also have an opportunity to make money doing it.
Monetization aside, David Schweidel, a marketing expert, tells us younger influencers showed during this election how effectively and quickly they can produce content.
What they do better than older generations is they get out content, so movements are going to have the ability to gain traction much more rapidly.
Something he believes could be a game changer moving forward, especially as campaigns try and utilize all social media platforms.
If the old approach would have been, all right, we've got C-SPAN, we've got cable news outlets, we've got traditional press releases, the new approach is going to be social media.
Now, experts also say always double check where you're getting your information. Some influencers are in hot water right now after jumping on a last-minute trend before TikTok was banned, revealing that they actually lied in order to gain millions of followers. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Unemployment claims hitting their highest level in more than 3 years, coming in at 223,000 for the week ending January 18th. That's a 6,000 app increase compared to the week before. The total number of Americans receiving benefits hit 1.9 million, the most since November 2021. The raise suggests finding new jobs is difficult despite a stronger economy. And more Americans now face the spread of multiple viruses, ushering in a busy season. According to the CDC, seasonal flu activity remains elevated across most of the country. The agency lists activities as high or very high in 33 states and Washington, D.C. Nationally, emergency department visits are high for diagnosed influenza and RSV. ER visits for COVID-19 are elevated compared to the fall. Many Americans with auto loans owe more than their cars are worth. Nearly a quarter of trade-ins towards new car purchases had negative equity. The Fact Check team's Janae Bowens is joining us now, and you looked into an analysis, Janae, from car shopping experts at Edmunds. Yeah. How much negative equity do people have?
Yeah, Dee, so Americans with these upside-down car loans owe more money than ever before, with the average being over $6,800, and 1 in 4 with negative equity owes more than $10,000.
Wow. And if you look at the factors that are contributing to these numbers, it sounds like the period during the pandemic was really pivotal.
Exactly. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was an inventory shortage, which pushed up demand, and people were paying more than the car's worth. Now folks are owing a lot more money and have longer loan terms. Now, since they overpaid when they try to sell it, it's now at a much lower rate. Overall, Americans owe $1.644 trillion in auto loan debt, and that's according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
Okay, if people watching this right now thinking, okay, how can I avoid this situation? What are experts saying?
Yeah, so experts tell me it's best to keep a car for as long as possible, and at least for the entirety of your loan, try to get the shortest term possible. 6 or 7 years is way too long.
All right, Janae, thank you. Good advice. Janae will be back in a few minutes to discuss the auto loan rate forecast for 2025 and if buyers could be getting some relief. But first, new information. The Delmarva Avian Influenza Joint Information Center in Delaware has announced increased efforts to test for bird flu in sick and dead wild snow geese and other birds. This comes as cases of avian influenza continue to spread. More than a dozen dead birds were found on a Delaware beach over the weekend. It's not been confirmed if the birds had bird flu, but it is sparking wider concern. The state is asking if you find sick or dead birds to report it to the state immediately. Ahead on the National News Desk, unexpected health impacts because of retirement. The two major issues those 65 and up are facing right now. And AI advantage, President Trump's push to make the U.S. a leader in developing technology. The plan, he says, could reshape the global economy. President Trump is investing $500 billion into artificial intelligence in the U.S. Tech leaders involved with Stargate were at the White House this week when Trump announced the project.
Beginning immediately, Stargate will be building the physical and virtual infrastructure to power the next generation of advancements in AI, and this will include the construction of colossal data centers.
And Trump says the new company will be formed by tech firms OpenAI, SoftBank, and Oracle. The chairman of Oracle says the first data project is already under construction in Texas. Joining Jan Jeffcoat to discuss is Vice President of General Economics and Trade at the Cato Institute, Scott Lincecum.
You know, there were so many executive actions that were taken, but I want to begin with the latest regarding the billions that are going to get pumped into the U.S. economy for AI, because it is expected to bring, as we know, tens of thousands of jobs. The goal is to make America the leader here in AI. How important, though, was it, Scott, to also then have this infrastructure plan in place to build these data centers? Because, you know, we hear lawmakers say you can't build it if you can't be reliant on alternative energy. Talk to us about the importance of Trump's energy proposals in regards to this moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, infrastructure and energy are critically important for the AI boom here in the United States. You know, we're experiencing this data center construction boom, and not just because of AI, by the way, but these centers need tons of energy when they're finally up and running, and the current electricity supply, along with the electricity grid itself, just isn't ready. So we can welcome these private investments, but it's just a start. There's a catch, and that is that we also need regulatory reform. We need permitting reform, especially because all that spending and all these promises might not matter if it takes so long and costs so much to get through the regulations and actually build these things. So hopefully we'll be hearing more about that next.
We also learned Trump putting China on notice, planning 10% tariffs on Chinese imports starting possibly as early as February 1st. And he said this is because they continue sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada to be trafficked across the border. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, with Trump and tariffs, I think it's always more important to look at his actions and not his words. Recall, you know, last time around, we had all sorts of tariff threats, tariffs on Mexico because of immigration, tariffs on European cars, you name it. So I pay more attention on day one to his executive order that directed various agencies to come up with their tariff plans by April 1st. So that might delay things a little bit more than these immediate threats. And those things, I think those are going to be the ones we should keep an eye on, not these statements about tariffs, especially when it comes to things like putting tariffs on Canadian crude oil and Mexican avocados and other things like that.
And we know the president, as you said, might be using some of these tactics as a bargaining tool.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, though, would lowering the corporate tax rate, would that offset tariffs? You know, what do you think about a 15% corporate tax rate?
Well, I'd love to see the corporate tax rate set to zero, and certainly that would boost growth. So a 15% rate would be better than we have now, but it will still reduce tax revenue, and we can't afford more debt, so there's got to be some pay for somewhere. And tariffs, though, I should say, really are a terrible way to raise that revenue. They raise all sorts of distortions. They have a really narrow tax base, and they're really bad for growth. So they can offset all the benefits of those corporate tax cuts. So instead, we need to pursue pro-growth tax reform, cut loopholes, cut tax subsidies, cut spending too. That's a far better way to deal with any revenue loss than raising tariffs.
He says cut spending, increase energy production. What are some key economic indicators you're keeping a close eye on, and what's your projection for America's economy moving forward?
Well, the economy's in a pretty decent spot right now, but I am watching a few things. First, the manufacturing sector. It's been in a slump for more than 2 years now, and I'm watching to see if it finally climbs out because of the Fed and some other economic issues. Second, I'm watching private investment overall. On the one hand, investors are really happy right now with Trump's tax and deregulatory promises. But on the other hand, they don't like tariffs and they hate all the uncertainty surrounding all these tariff threats. And so we want to see how private investment's going to respond in the next few months. And then finally, a bit wonky, but bond yields. You know, bond yields tell us a lot about what investors think about the economy and about federal debt. And they spiked, indicating trouble ahead. But then they've calmed down in the last week or so. So we're watching those to see how investors think we can handle our debts and handle all that spending.
Vice President of General Economics and Trade at the Cato Institute, Scott Lincecum. Always great to see you. Have a great weekend.
The number of Americans 65 or older is projected to increase 47% by 2050. New research indicates retirement could be hard on your health in some unexpected ways. Medical reporter Liz Bonus explains.
Hey there, everybody. We all think we just can't wait to retire, have a few days off, get out of the work thing. But a new study shows some disturbing trends, especially when it comes to our mental health and addiction.
Those who retire show more signs of depression than those who are still working, according to researchers in the journal Aging and Mental Health. I spoke with Cedarville University's Betsy Linnell about why this happens.
We get this kind of false hope of what's going to be and this expectation, and then when they get there to the retirement years, it just feels so much emptier because they have devoted so much of their life to work.
What's more, researchers found is when retirees turned to alcohol to adjust to this change, it made the depression symptoms worse.
It's nice to be able to get to that stage of life, but it needs something in it.
That something, Counselor Linnell says, may be as simple as what retired nurse Bev Stewart started doing. She joined Kentucky's Calvary Baptist Church Needle and Thread Group.
And they said, why don't you make a quilt?
She'd never been particularly crafty, but she says,
now I make quilts and take them to our shut-ins and to hospice and to other areas, to veterans and all. It's just amazing what this group can do, but they can teach an old dog new tricks. They taught me how to make quilts.
Counselor Linnell says the quilts or any other way you choose to give back in retirement can help turn depression around.
Sometimes we think retirement should be empty, but then it feels empty.
Helping others, she says, keeps us connected and redirects purpose.
That life of service, she says, just needs to continue in another way. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
Up next, a robber breaks into a California home while a mom and her kids are asleep. The horrifying close call all caught on camera. Plus, snow down south. A rare snowstorm paralyzes beach communities. Shocking new video, and why residents say they've never seen anything like it. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From space heaters causing house fires in Ohio to a burglar caught on camera in California. We're taking the pulse of America, but we start with a rare snowstorm hitting South Carolina.
The Myrtle Beach Boardwalk turning into a winter wonderland on Tuesday night, with families quickly heading out to give their kids a chance to play with the snow on the beach. And for one local, Lizzie Noblin, seeing snow on the beach is worth braving the cold.
It's freezing. It feels nice, honestly. I'm not used to snow on my face, and I'm loving it.
But for another local, seeing it snow on the beach has a whole different meaning. Stephen Dotson recently found out he has stage 4 stomach cancer, and seeing it snow at the beach was at the top of his bucket list.
Experience it. I mean, to have, when people think about the beach, they think about, warm and sunshine, and this is just amazing to be able to witness the snow on the beach, how beautiful it is.
He pulled the screen off, and then he, I guess, did one of these.
Making his way inside Tatiana Cummings' apartment unit near South Irwin and Scott Streets in Hanford. Cameras inside the apartment were rolling Thursday when it happened while she and her children were taking an afternoon nap. More frightening still, take a close look. That's her 6-year-old daughter sound asleep on the couch with the crook hovering right above her.
I broke down because, one, it was a grown man in my house. I had no knowledge of it. And my 6-year-old daughter was sleeping. So it was like, that was like my biggest thing. Like, I didn't care that my MacBook was gone. I didn't care about like my backpack. I didn't care about my purse. It was like, my daughter's okay.
Hey, there's a fire between Grove and Warner right on the corner behind Benji's Bakery.
And there's a house over here on fire.
There's people that live here and they're trying, I think they're locked in their house.
Do you think the people are inside?
They're definitely inside, I can hear them.
These calls came in around 7:30 Monday evening. Dayton fire crews responded shortly after. Dayton Fire tells us that 2 people made it out of the burning home alive, but 1 died at the scene. This was the second deadly fire of 2025 within Dayton. Assistant Fire Chief Brad French tells us the cause of that fire was accidental, possibly due to a heating appliance of some kind.
We say all the time, space heaters need space. We want to make sure that space heaters have at least 3 feet of space around them from any combustible objects at all times, because that certainly can be a cause of a fire when those space heaters get a little bit too close to some other things.
The IRS is now interested in your side hustle. If you earn more than $5,000 online, you can expect to get a 1099-K form this month. That's higher than the proposed $600 threshold back in 2021, but that's being phased in and will take effect for 2026 taxes. Before now, online platforms like eBay and Etsy mostly sent out tax forms to users who earn more than $20,000. Millions more taxpayers will be receiving forms to make sure they comply. And Netflix is raising its prices on most of its subscription tiers in the U.S. and Canada. This as the streaming giant reports 19 million new subscribers in the last quarter of 2024. It's Netflix's biggest ever jump in subscribers and puts the streaming giant at 302 million worldwide, solidifying its hold on the top spot in the industry. And a standard monthly membership without advertisements going from $15.49 to $17.99, while a standard account with ads will rise $1 to $7.99. Netflix also reported revenue increased 16% from the same quarter the previous year. Ahead in our next half hour, cold and flu season now in full swing. The illness doctors are warning could be bad for your heart. And you're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
DEI is something that the public has rejected over and over again.
Diversity is about making sure that we are all included in the room.
Trump's plan to purge DEI put into motion the proposed policies that could impact schools. Plus, America's stature on the world stage. An expert explains how Trump's strategy will differ from Biden's. And later,
more options for buyers, a little bit more bargaining power. It's going to be a healthier housing market in 2025.
the home buyer headache could be easing. New predictions about the hottest markets this year. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for being here. Right now, the U.S. Department of Education is taking steps to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives just days after President Trump directed federal agencies to do so. Donald Trump signed 2 executive orders this week that could impact college students. National correspondent Kelly Gaskins joins us with that story from Washington.
The new president wasting no time getting to work, signing a flurry of executive orders during his first days back in the Oval Office.
Thank you very much, sir.
2 of those impacting colleges. One takes direct aim at diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in higher education, declaring them a violation of federal civil rights. Trump signing the order after already moving to end all DEI programs in the federal government.
DEI is something that the public has rejected over and over again, and this is something that I think is going to be a popular part of President Trump's mandate.
Diversity is about making sure that we are all included in the room and have a seat at the table. DEI is not a bad word, no matter how many times you try and make it out to be.
In the order, Trump directs the Attorney General and the Secretary of Education to issue joint guidance within 120 days to all educational agencies receiving federal funds on how to comply. Another executive order appears to target foreign students who participated in pro-Hamas rallies following the October 7th attack on Israel. The order calls for the removal of foreign visa holders who advocate for aid or support designated foreign terrorists and other threats to our national security. The move seen as Trump making good on another campaign promise.
If you come here from another country and try to bring jihadism or anti-Americanism or anti-Semitism to our campuses, we will immediately deport you.
The Council on American Islamic Relations says the order threatens an unprecedented crackdown on free speech and legal immigration based on vague, subjective, and unenforceable criteria.
Since the ceasefire announcement, the college protests have died down. It's unclear, though, if the Trump administration will use the order to identify students from last year's protests. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins, reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
A man accused of setting fire to a Wisconsin congressman's office over the short-lived TikTok ban appeared in court this week. 16-year-old Caden Stackowitz is charged with arson, attempted burglary, criminal damage, and terrorist threats. The county district attorney said Stackowitz sought out Representative Glenn Grotham's office because he voted yes to force a sale of TikTok. A $500,000 bond was set. He's due back in court January 30th. For a preliminary hearing. Canadian officials are pushing back against President Donald Trump's accusations of increasing migrant crossings into the U.S. The president planning to impose a 25% tariff for the nation. Trump claims migrants and fentanyl are entering the U.S. through the northern border. U.S. Customs and Border Protection apprehended a record of almost 24,000 people this year. Canada recently unveiled a $900 million border security plan to combat this.
We are prepared to deal with any potential surge. I've met with the officials at the RCMP, the CBSA. There is domestic cooperation between our agencies, between the federal and provincial governments.
Order of peace on Earth, the nearly 5,500-mile line is marked by fences and barriers. Residents worry migrants will head north for asylum due to lack of resources. After 900 days, New York State native Ryan Corbett has been freed by the Taliban in a prisoner exchange. Corbett was detained in 2022 while in Afghanistan for business. His family released a statement saying they are overwhelmed with joy.
This one was particularly challenging. And I think ultimately really was successful because of the strength of Ryan's wife, Anna, and their children, being amazing advocates.
Corbett and another American, William McEntee, were a part of the deal that returned incarcerated Taliban member Khan Mohammed to Afghanistan. In his inauguration speech, President Trump kept it focused domestically, but is focused widely on pushing the nation's current status on an international scale. Joining me earlier this week, Professor of Political Science at the University of Buffalo, Dr. Carla Martinez-Machine.
So Trump has been critical of NATO, claiming they don't pay their fair share. What role do you think that will have this administration from a global standpoint?
Yes, that's correct. He has said they haven't paid their fair share. He did that in his previous administration. And, well, in reality, I don't expect to see a huge change in U.S. interactions with Europe from the first Trump administration. We know that already the U.S. military presence in Europe was downsizing. We might see less emphasizing of the NATO relationship. But again, I would expect it to remain somewhat similar.
Trump said earlier from the White House that the EU should pay their fair share to Ukraine. What are your expectations on that front when it comes to support for Ukraine? As you know, it has divided Republicans.
Correct. Yes. And I do expect that support to Ukraine from the U.S. will decrease under the Trump administration as compared to the Biden one. And overall, though, we know that previously Trump had a somewhat positive relationship with Vladimir Putin, but recently he was actually critical of Putin. So I think there's some uncertainty as to how much the U.S. will continue to support Ukraine. Certainly, I expect less than under the Biden administration.
That's a good point. Trump's recent comments about Putin. Trump has talked a lot about buying Greenland and then separately Canada becoming the 51st state. Do you think he's serious about this, or could this be about messaging?
Well, the Canada part I certainly see about messaging. Greenland, perhaps not so much buying it, but I could see Trump negotiating with Denmark, Greenland being an autonomous territory of Denmark, to, for example, push for an expanded U.S. military presence in Greenland. The Arctic is becoming hugely important with the melting of the ice caps. New routes, new trade routes are going to be opening up. The military importance of it is becoming even more, it's being emphasized more by states. So I could see him negotiating for a greater military presence, for example.
All right, we will wait and see. Dr. Carla Martinez-Machine, thank you for joining us tonight on the National News Desk.
Thank you.
Students throughout the state of New York may soon have to give up their cell phones during school hours. A new proposal from Governor Kathy Hochul would force students to disconnect during class. Hochul, who has long hinted at a potential ban, says she believes limiting access to smartphones during school hours would help the focus and mental health of students. If approved, the measure would take effect next fall. The FDA now releasing a new strategy to help prevent the contamination of fresh and frozen berries. Hepatitis A and norovirus have been linked to both around the world. The FDA analyzed several outbreaks and identified gaps that were likely contributing to the contamination. New strategies promote sanitary process compliance, virus education, and worker immunization. The last U.S. outbreak involved imported strawberries in 2022 and 23. The quademic is now spreading across the nation. It's the combination of COVID-19, RSV, the norovirus, and the flu. Cardiologists are warning not only can the illnesses make you sick, it could add stress to your heart. It may start off with flu-like symptoms like a fever, fatigue, muscle aches, and chills. But then you may also begin to notice trouble breathing, blue lips, or chest pain, a fever or cough that gets worse, confusion, or non-responsiveness.
We believe that it irritates coronary plaque. We have seen increased incidence of heart attacks related to this.
If you experience any of these symptoms, you are urged to get immediate medical attention. A consumer alert for families looking to buy a new home. Zillow just released its hot housing market for 2025. The National News Desk, Angelo Brown, went through the list.
Salt Lake City, Utah, projected to be the hottest real estate market in the West this year. Our reporters on the ground in Salt Lake talked to housing experts who found the ranking rather surprising.
Maybe a little bit surprising given how unaffordable just the housing market everywhere has become.
Here's Salt Lake sitting at number 10 with the top 3 shaping up like this. For the second year in a row, Buffalo comes in at number 1, followed by Indianapolis in second, Providence, Rhode Island in third. To come up with this list of the hottest markets, Zillow analyzed the 50 largest U.S. metro areas for the following: home value growth, projected change in owner-occupied homes, the speed at which homes are sold, job growth compared to new construction.
Homeowners are starting to come back on the housing market. Inventory is up about 17% from the previous year, from last year. And so more options for buyers, a little bit more bargaining power, a slight improvement in affordability could be good for the housing market. It's going to be a healthier housing market in 2025.
Zillow predicts that 18 metro areas will experience faster home value growth in 2025 than they did last year. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
If you are in the market for a new car, 2025 might be a good year for you to buy one. Bankrate experts predict auto loan rates will decrease this year. The fact check team's Janae Bowens is back. Got to bring up the list of dream cars that I want. How low do experts think that these rates will get?
Yeah, Dee Dee. So analysis shows a slight decrease to 7% this year. Now, we saw rates as high as 8.58% last year. The estimated drop is thanks to an improving economy, banks wanting to increase loan demand, and more interest rate cuts from the Federal Reserve. However, we have to keep in mind cars are still expensive, up 20 to 25% since 2020. So it's suggested to get a cheaper car for the most bang for your buck. The average amount being financed for a car is now $38,000.
Well, it sounds like there is a little relief on the way for car buyers. But speaking of loans, what about folks who want to buy a home?
Yeah, so experts think it's going to be a volatile year for mortgage rates, so a lot of up and down because of the impact of inflation, employment, consumer spending, and Federal Reserve cuts. Now, Bankrate warns against thinking rates will go back to 3 and 4%, but rates could settle at 6.5% by the end of the year, whereas last year it was above 7% for a good chunk of 2024. And housing inventory levels are improving, giving buyers more options.
All right, Janae, thank you. And for more on this fact check team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. Stellantis is recalling more than 63,000 Jeep Cherokees due to a defect that causes the vehicle to lose power and brake function, increasing the risk of a crash. The vehicles can also lose the ability to park, which can cause an unintended rollaway. The recall affects certain 2017 through 2019 Jeep Cherokees. Chrysler has not yet released how they intend to fix the problem. So far, no crashes or injuries have been reported. Still to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from Trump's deportation plan taking shape to his blanket pardon related to January 6th.
And welcome back. Week one of President Trump's second term in the books, and the massive amount of news coming out of the White House this past week was akin to, as the band Crowded House sang almost 40 years ago, trying to catch a deluge in a paper cup. Our Washington bureau and our team of correspondents has been all over the happenings in D.C. One of Trump's top promises, his immigration and deportation plan taking shape. National correspondent Christine Frizzell, what have we seen so far?
Yeah, well, first of all, on Inauguration Day, the president said he's declaring a national emergency at the southern border. So what does that mean? Well, it means just about everything. Within the first 48 hours of taking office, we saw hundreds arrested, mostly in sanctuary cities, places like Boston, Denver, Philadelphia, and here in Washington, D.C. Now, what the Trump administration says they're doing, they're going after criminals, people who've been convicted of crimes in this country mostly, but they have used the term collateral arrest. That means people that are targets who have been arrested. If they're staying at the home and there's other undocumented migrants there, they're going to take them up too. The Trump administration has ordered 1,500 troops to the border and has told another 10,000 to be ready to deploy to the southern border as well. We are hearing that a lot of people are living in fear. They're putting down their shades, living in their houses and not opening the door. We're hearing, ever since Donald Trump signed an executive order saying that churches and schools and hospitals are no longer off limits, Well, community activists are saying that's not true. People are confused. People are worried, especially in some of these big cities.
Yeah, we'll be hearing a lot more about this as the weeks go on. Meanwhile, Trump's sweeping pardon of virtually everyone charged in connection with the January 6, 2021 riot at the Capitol, drawing criticism from both Democrats and Republicans, also drawing bipartisan criticism. President Biden's preemptive pardons of his family members minutes before he left office. National correspondent Matt Galka, while they may seem like totally separate things, there is a connection between the two pardons.
Yeah, Steve, they seem they're connected now, and they may be forever connected. I mean, we'll start with now former President Joe Biden. Some unprecedented pardons at the time when he's pardoning his own family members, preemptive pardons, also saying things like it doesn't necessarily mean they're guilty of anything, but alluding to that he didn't want any political retribution on his family members or the current administration to go after them now that he's gone. But still, that kind of pardon power really had not been seen before, especially the unprecedentedness of the preemptive pardons that were given out. And they're connected to the January 6th pardons now because you do have members in the Republican Party who have pointed to those other pardons from Joe Biden as Senate Majority Leader John Thune said, it opened the door for all of the other stuff before saying that they're looking forward and not looking backwards. So these things, they're separate issues, separate people, separate presidents, but they seem connected, at least in the eyes of some of the people who are raising their eyebrows at the just the weight and the massive scale of some of these pardons. And look, as the Wall Street Journal has been writing about for most of the past week here, they called pardon power a new political weapon and also questioned why the January 6th pardons happened at all, especially for violent offenders. So certainly some eyebrow raising pardons that we've seen from the president who had his last day, and then the new president on his first day. And I go back to that Wall Street Journal article again, a new political weapon, and it remains to be seen how it could be wielded again going forward.
Yeah, in addition to the pardons, executive orders, Trump has been signing executive orders pretty much from the minute after he finished his inaugural address. Another set of these Trump executive orders focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI programs. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, tell us about that.
Yeah, and it's no surprise that multiple DEI orders or executive orders focused on DEI have been top of the president's to-do list this week. He did campaign heavily on doing away with DEI programs, and he's already taken steps to make that promise a reality. So, Steve, one of the executive orders put all DEI employees, government employees on leave effective immediately. So that already happened. It's unclear exactly how many government employees this order impacts, but it's likely to be a lot. The ultimate goal is to have those offices shut down. Now, before Trump took office, we already learned that the FBI had shut down their office of DEI back in December. So some of these agencies already started taking preemptive measures to make that happen. Now, the second order focuses on DEI in higher education. This is something that we heard a lot from now President Trump on the campaign trail as well. He says that these DEI policies violate federal anti-discrimination laws. And so I think what we're starting to see here, Steve, is really just the very beginning of this crusade to wipe all of those programs that are relatively new to American life, wipe them totally away. Steve.
Talking point on the campaign trail for President Trump, and something that he made a lot of promises about during the campaign as well. Kayla, Matt, Christine, thank you all for your hard work. Back to you.
Straight ahead, Florida mandating certain start times for high schoolers. The district pushing back, saying it's not the right move for their families. And later, encampment chaos. A building manager left frustrated after the city refuses to move debris out of the way of residents. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We are reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From a measles outbreak in Washington state to outrage over homeless encampments in Maine. We're taking the pulse of America, but we start with a debate over school start times in Florida.
It looks like school start times in Palm Beach County may not change after all.
Motion carries unanimously.
Wednesday night, school district board members unanimously voted to ask the state legislature for an exemption to a new Florida law.
Saying, please, 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 I'm a parent, I'm a teacher, I'm an administrator, I have children in the school. Please, this is just not going to work out.
That law requires Florida middle schools to start no later than 8 a.m. or high schools after 8:30 a.m.
When this bill first came up last year in session, it sounded like such a great idea. Let the kids sleep a little later, start school later, but the unintended consequences of that action came forward when the parents started reaching out to us.
In fact, the district took a poll of parents, and 75% of them said they would like to keep school start times where they are.
Measles cases are on the rise globally and locally.
I'll be very surprised if there's not a lot more people from Snohomish that were in SeaTac Airport on January 10th that we just didn't get notified of specifically.
The CDC notified local officials of those exposures. Measles is highly contagious, spread through the air, which is why people who walked through SeaTac International Airport January 10th between 2:30 and 8 p.m. may have been exposed.
Because measles is so contagious and very airborne, that can be somebody who's in the same building, even a very large building, sharing the same airspace as a person who is infected.
Biggest issue is the trash and people actually living in this short alleyway behind my building.
Ken Caldwell says he's been seeing this for months, along with people camped out. He's tried to get help from the city, but it's been unsuccessful.
Police and both the public works say, well, push it to the sidewalk and we'll clean it up. No, I'm not pushing it to the sidewalk, sorry.
The building on Chestnut Street is just feet from Portland High School. Caldwell says he's worried about students' safety.
It's just a health issue more than anything, and we really shouldn't have our kids exposed to this.
Portland has a law against encampments, but police who did respond here say it gets tricky when it comes to private properties.
In this instance, we just disassembled the tent to send the message that they couldn't be there, but the leftover items were on private property, so it's up to the property owner to remove those items.
It's my job as the building manager to make sure the facility is adequate, and that includes the grounds around it.
Still ahead, the struggling budget airline attempting to lure in customers, how you could use that extra cash sitting in your Venmo account to book a flight.
Yeah!
Wow, and get this is a 5-year-old. This 5-year-old is going viral for his high-energy bike stunts, bringing in over 1 million followers. Elliot Honeycutt of Southern California learned to ride a bike at just 2 years old after tagging along with his dad. Elliot says he falls all the time, but that he always gets back on and continues the ride. So impressive. NASA just unveiled the deepest observation of the Andromeda galaxy in history. The panoramic image is made up of 600 individual pictures taken over 10 years. The Andromeda galaxy is our closest neighbor and contains more than 1 trillion stars, all of which are hotter than the sun. You can soon book your next JetBlue flight using Venmo. The payment option will be available in the coming months on their mobile app. The announcement comes as the struggling airline continues to look for new ways to lure customers. Last fall, JetBlue introduced a plan to create its first ever airport lounges in JFK and Boston Logan airports. Additional routes and flights were unveiled earlier this month. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News. Now, don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.